I think what I want for people who read Closing the Vocabulary Gap is firstly to understand the vocabulary gap. It starts before children ever get to school. For disadvantaged children, it's more of an issue, and really I want to make this problem better understood for teachers, for parents, for policymakers, anyone who tackles the book. But then beyond that, I want the book to be really practical, and I want it to be a book for teachers where they can understand the problem, and then it offers them really tangible solutions that they can use in their classroom, they can think about as a whole school. So one of the things I offer is basically 7 steps around tackling the issue of vocabulary and the gaps that might exist in our classroom and between children in our school. So I want them to take those practical steps from how do you explicitly teach a single word? Something as simple and as micro as that, and then upwards to across multiple schools, how do you communicate and train teachers to understand the issue, and how might they better approach their practice? It might be A-level science, it might be Key Stage 1 geography work, it might be reading at Key Stage 2, it might be mathematics in Year 8. So really varied practice, but with really strong strategies for vocabulary instruction. I think I learned a huge amount. I've been teaching for 15 years, and what researching into vocabulary showed me really is just how little I knew, which is probably unsurprising, but as an English teacher, I'm expected to know a lot about language. So there was all kinds of layers of meaning and understanding around vocabulary that I didn't quite know. One of the questions I had is, how do you teach a word? As simple and as profound as that challenge is. And for me, interesting research about how many times children need to be exposed to words, why certain words are sticky and are easily understood, and why other words come with misconceptions. There was lots of detail. There were so many things that surprised me. My real challenge was to try and take this massive evidence and make it easily understood for teachers, and to give them really practical strategies around that. I think in terms of, for books for teachers, there are quite a few books around literacy, more broadly. And an analogy I use around literacy is that it's a bit like Sisyphus. You're kind of pushing a boulder up the mountain, but literacy is so big, it's so complex, the boulder seems to keep on rolling back down. And vocabulary for me, to take another kind of mythical allusion, is like a Trojan horse. It kind of takes the bigger issue of literacy, but it shows it in a nice, simple vocabulary is a very visible thing. It seems very obvious to teachers that teaching vocabulary is important. But once you get in there, once you get that Trojan horse of vocabulary in and understood, actually it opens up lots of understanding around the reading process, around talk, around the academic language of different subject domains, about how language changes over time and becomes more complex as you move through the different phases in school. So for me, it takes a big issue, a big complex issue, and it distills it down into something that's better understood for teachers, something they can do something about, and hopefully it's a very practical book. One of the things I aim with my writing is to take research evidence findings, take robust guidance for teachers, but make it really practical and understood, because teachers are really busy and they don't necessarily have the time to read all that research themselves. So hopefully it's a practical distillation for teachers, and it narrows and shrinks the problem of the new curriculum down to something we can do something about. I've got a chapter about spelling. It's definitely an issue in schools for primary school teachers. They have spelling lists, and pretty much everyone approaches tackling the spelling issue in the same way, and that's testing spelling. I think the argument I pose in the book is that actually we do too little teaching of spelling, and by that I mean phonics from early years in Key Stage 1 and to a degree in Key Stage 2 is now consistently taught in schools, but there's a wealth of useful approaches that attend vocabulary instruction that really help for spelling. So in chapter 3, I really get underneath what is in a word, and I break words down into their parts. and that's the area of morphology. And I also look at word histories and etymology. And building up that knowledge around word parts and word histories, actually, you can tailor that to spelling instruction. So one example I give is the word ghost. Children often don't spell the word ghost correctly. They spell it phonetically without the H. And one of the strategies there is telling the story about why it's effectively a 500-year-old mistake. And that Caxton's printing presses, he brought some Flemish assistants along, and they popped in an error in effect from the Flemish, so geest for ghost, and the spelling of ghost that we have today is a 500-year-old mistake committed by a Flemish assistant. Now, not every spelling has a story, but a lot of spelling does have a rational explanation. It has roots in the sounds of words, so phonics. It also has roots in the parts of words and their history. And through the book, I build up a set of strategies around if you teach morphology and if you teach narratives around words, and if you explicitly teach words, actually it gives children the tools they need to become better at spelling. So that's one issue I really hope teachers learn far more about from the book.